Welcome to our channel, where the heart of Africa beats in every story. Here we bring you captivating tales filled with rich culture, deep emotions and unforgettable characters. Each story offers a journey through love, conflict and the supernatural, revealing the truths of our humanity. If you crave adventures that resonate with your spirit and soul, you're in the right place. Join our community and subscribe now to be part of the magic as we explore the enchanting world of Nollywood storytelling. Let's embark on this journey together. In the heart of Nigeria, there was a village called Kpanchi, nestled beneath a canopy of trees. Its people were bound by tradition and fear. For centuries, the legend of Ojuju Calabar haunted their nights and filled their homes with whispers. No one knew exactly what Ojuju Calabar was. Some said it was a spirit, others a monster, but all agreed it was a mysterious and dangerous force. The mere mention of its name sent shivers down the villagers' spines. Though no one had ever seen it, its presence was undeniable. The village lived under its shadow, believing it to be a harbinger of doom and terror. One fateful day, the faint rumors became terrifyingly real. Children began to vanish without a trace. One by one, they disappeared into the night, leaving behind devastated families and rising panic. The village of Kpanchi was gripped with fear. Parents clung to their children tighter, and the streets grew silent as the sun set. The village king, King Etu, watched helplessly as his people's despair deepened. Determined to protect his people and end the fear, he issued a decree. Anyone who could identify the mysterious creature and bring peace to the village would be handsomely rewarded. The reward was more than just wealth. Whoever succeeded would also earn the hand of his beautiful daughter, Chaya, in marriage. Men from all over Kpanchi stepped forward, eager to claim both the riches and Chaya. Armed with courage and hope, they ventured into the deep, dense forest. However, the forest was unforgiving. Its towering trees and thick underbrush seemed to conspire against the brave men, trapping them in a maze of shadows and secrets. Days passed and many who ventured into the forest never returned. The villagers, waiting with bated breath, began to lose hope. Amid this turmoil, a young man named Ojuju Calabar stood apart. His motivation was different. Ojuju had lost his two siblings, Enema and Aneche, to the creature. After the death of their parents, they were all he had left. Their disappearance left him broken and filled with anger. The pain of their loss was a wound that never healed. For him, the king's promise of wealth and marriage meant little. His only goal was to uncover the truth about the creature and find his lost siblings. For years, Ojuju had prepared for this moment. He spent countless nights studying the lore of the forest, speaking to elders and honing his skills. He trained his body to endure the harshest conditions, learning the ways of the land and its creatures. While others sought fortune, he sought answers. His heart burned with hope that his siblings were still alive somewhere, and that uncovering the truth about the creature would bring him closer to finding them. The time had come for Ojuju to act. He would venture into the same forest that had swallowed so many brave men before him. But unlike the others, he carried not just weapons but knowledge. Knowledge passed down through generations, hidden in the village's stories. As he set out on his journey, he knew it would not be easy, but his determination was stronger than any fear. He would face whatever dangers awaited him, for in his heart, he believed that the truth would finally be revealed, and with it, the hope of reuniting with his lost family. With fierce resolve, Ojuju set out to confront the darkness that had haunted his family for so long. The mystic creature was about to face a foe driven by a personal quest for justice and redemption. But what lay ahead was beyond anything he could have imagined. The day of reckoning had finally arrived. Ojuju packed his essentials and set off toward Ikono Forest, a place feared by many but one he had studied for years. As he ventured deeper into the forest, the air grew thick with anticipation. The towering trees loomed over him, their twisted branches forming a canopy that allowed only slivers of light to filter through. The forest seemed alive, the leaves whispering secrets carried by the wind, and every shadow seemed to move with intent. Suddenly, the gentle breeze that had accompanied him through the forest came to an abrupt halt. The air around him felt heavy, almost unnatural. Before Ojuju could react, something or someone seized him from behind. The force was powerful, an unseen grip that tightened around him like a vice. He struggled to break free, thrashing against the invisible hold, but his strength seemed insignificant against the overwhelming power that restrained him. As he fought, a sharp pain shot across his face. An unseen force had slashed him from his forehead down to his chin. The cut was deep, and blood began to trickle down his face, but the pain was nothing compared to the fear that surged through him. The world around Ojuju started to blur. His vision darkened as his strength drained away, and he collapsed, falling face first onto the forest floor. Silence fell over the forest as Ojuju lay motionless, his body broken and battered. For 4 days, Ojuju lay unconscious in the heart of Ikono Forest, exposed to the elements. His breathing was shallow, and it seemed as though life itself was slipping away. But then, something strange, something miraculous began to happen. Though his body was still, it was changing. Slowly, his muscles began to swell, expanding with each passing hour. His limbs grew longer, his chest broader, and his skin hardened like stone. It was as if the forest itself had started to work on him, reshaping him into something more than human. When Ojuju finally stirred, his eyes fluttered open to the dim light filtering through the trees. He pushed himself up from the ground, the movement feeling strange, almost unnatural. As he rose, he realized with a shock that the forest around him seemed smaller, far smaller than he remembered. His head brushed against the tops of the trees, and when he looked down, his body was no longer the one he had known. Ojuju had been transformed into a giant, towering over the very trees that had once seemed so formidable. His hands, now enormous, clenched into fists, and he felt a surge of power coursing through him. The gash on his face had healed, leaving only a faint scar as a reminder of the battle he had fought in the shadows. His transformation was both a gift and a curse, for now he carried the strength to face the mystic creature, but at what cost? Ojuju was no longer just a man seeking justice for his family. He had become something more. His journey had taken an unexpected turn, and as he gazed out over the forest, he knew that the true battle was only just beginning. The legend of Ojuju Calabar was about to be rewritten, and the truth that awaited him would be far more shocking than any myth ever told. As Ojuju stood up, the world around him had changed in ways he could hardly comprehend. The forest, once vast and imposing, now appeared tiny and fragile, the trees resembling little more than twigs. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of his sudden transformation. What kind of sorcery had overtaken him? And how could this possibly help him in his quest to find his siblings and unmask the creature that had terrorized his village? Ojuju had become something otherworldly, but his mission remained painfully human, to find those he loved and uncover the truth. Uncertain of his next step, Ojuju decided to return to the village of Kpanchi. Afraid of what the villagers might think and worried for his safety, Ojuju decided to cover his face with a veil and sneak back into his hut, hoping no one would see him. But something unexpected happened. As Ojuju approached his hut, one of the villagers noticed his large figure and was immediately frightened. He ran off to warn the others, shouting that the creature responsible for the disappearance of their children had returned. The following morning, more and more villagers gathered around Ojuju's hut, protesting and accusing him of being the cause of the missing children. "He's the one taking our children," a woman shouted, her voice trembling with fear. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Another villager cried out, "Ojuju Calabar, the monster!" And with that, the dam broke. Fear and anger spread like wildfire, igniting the villagers' long-held anxieties. The people, already terrified by the unexplained disappearances of their children, were now convinced that the giant before them was the creature responsible. "Ojuju Calabar! Ojuju Calabar!" they chanted, the name that had once been whispered in fear now a rallying cry for vengeance. The crowd surged forward, their fear fueling their desire for justice. Some grabbed stones, others raised their fists, demanding answers. Ojuju stood frozen in the middle of the chaos, his heart pounding. He had returned seeking answers, but now the people who had once known him as one of their own saw him as the very evil he had sworn to destroy. His heart ached with the weight of their accusations. He had endured so much, lost so much, and now, instead of finding help, he was being branded as the villain. In that moment, Ojuju knew he had to clear his name. He couldn't let the villagers' fear blind them to the truth. But how could he, a giant, convince them that he was still the same man who had once walked among them? And more importantly, how could he stop the real creature behind the missing children? His mind raced, searching for a way out of the chaos. He had to act quickly, before the villagers' fear turned into something far more dangerous. The truth had to come to light, and Ojuju realized that his journey was no longer just about his siblings. It was about saving the village from a threat far greater than any of them had imagined. The news of Ojuju Calabar's transformation and the accusations against him spread quickly throughout Kpanchi. Fear and confusion consumed the village as the once respected Ojuju was now seen as a looming threat. The villagers, terrified and uncertain, gathered at the palace, demanding that the king take swift action. The sight of the giant had unsettled them, and in their panic, they believed that banishing Ojuju was the only way to ensure their safety. King Etu, however, was not so quick to judge. He remembered Ojuju's parents, who had been pillars of the community, respected, kind, and dignified. Their legacy lingered in his mind, and he struggled to believe that the son of such honorable people could be responsible for the village's suffering. Yet the king also knew that he had a responsibility to protect his people. The village was already on edge from the disappearances, and now, with the sudden appearance of a giant in their midst, fear threatened to turn into chaos. After long deliberation, King Etu made his decision. He issued a decree that balanced the need for justice with the memory of Ojuju's family and the uncertainty surrounding the true culprit. Ojuju Calabar was to be isolated from the rest of the village. He was forbidden from speaking to anyone, engaging in any trade, or participating in any village activities. It was not a complete banishment, but a silent exile within the very village he had called home. The king's decree was his way of keeping peace. By isolating Ojuju, he hoped to prevent further unrest and protect him from the villagers' anger, while still allowing time for the truth to be revealed. But as Ojuju stood alone, towering above the huts and marketplaces of Kpanchi, his heart grew heavy with sorrow. He had returned seeking answers, but instead he was cast out, misunderstood and feared. Even the king, who had shown him a measure of mercy, seemed uncertain. In the days that followed, Ojuju's isolation became a symbol of fear. The name Ojuju Calabar was now spoken not as the name of a man, but as a warning. Children were told to stay away from him, and adults whispered tales of his supposed monstrous deeds. If anyone caught a glimpse of the giant wandering the outskirts of the village, they would scream, "Ojuju Calabar!" and run in terror. His towering figure, once that of a fellow villager, now evoked dread wherever he went. But amidst the fear and rumors, there was one small light in Ojuju's dark world. A little boy, no more than 8 years old, dared to be different. His name was Ifa, and while the rest of the village shunned Ojuju, Ifa's heart was filled with curiosity and compassion. He had heard the stories from the elders, but something about them didn't sit right with him. He couldn't believe that the man everyone feared was truly a monster. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows across the village, Ifa quietly snuck away from his home. In his small hands, he carried a bundle of food, carefully wrapped in cloth. He made his way to the outskirts of Kpanchi, where Ojuju often stayed, far from the hustle and bustle of the village. When he found Ojuju, the giant sat alone, staring out into the distance, lost in his thoughts. Ifa hesitated for a moment, his heart pounding, but then he stepped forward. "Ojuju," he called softly, his voice trembling slightly. The giant turned, his eyes filled with surprise at the sight of the boy. "I brought you something," Ifa said, holding out the bundle of food. Ojuju, who had grown accustomed to the shouts and fear of the villagers, was taken aback by the boy's kindness. He knelt down, his massive form casting a long shadow over the boy, and gently took the food. "Thank you," he said, his voice soft but filled with emotion. In that moment, Ojuju realized that not everyone in the village saw him as a monster. From that day on, Ifa continued to visit Ojuju in secret. He brought food, stories, and most importantly, companionship. The boy's innocence and bravery touched Ojuju's heart, giving him hope that not all was lost. While the rest of Kpanchi turned their backs on him, Ifa's small act of kindness reminded Ojuju that there was still good in the world, and perhaps a chance to clear his name. As Ojuju sat with the boy, sharing stories under the fading light of the evening, the giant's heart began to heal, if only a little. Yet, he knew that his quest was far from over. He had to uncover the truth, not just for his own sake, but for the future of Kpanchi and the children who were still missing. One day, as the sun began to set and the sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, Ojuju sat with Aoife, who had become his only companion. The bond between the two had grown strong over the weeks, but something had been weighing on Ojuju's mind. He turned to the boy and asked softly, "Why aren't you scared of me like everyone else?" Aoife looked up at the giant, his young face calm and thoughtful. "I don't think you're a bad person," he said simply. "Children are still missing, and I've lost my twin sister too. I believe you can help me find them." Ojuju's heart ached at the mention of Aoife's missing sister, and memories of his own siblings, Enema and Eneche, surged within him. He had been on the same quest for so long, first as a man, and now as a giant. But hearing Aoife's unwavering belief in him stirred something new inside him. Ojuju shared his story, the loss of his siblings and his transformation in the forest, and Aoife listened with wide eyes, taking in every word. When Ojuju finished, the boy's voice was quiet but filled with a strange wisdom beyond his years. "Maybe our ancestors kept you alive, made you a giant for a purpose. You survived 4 days in the forest without food or water. That's not just luck, it's a sign." Ojuju was silent for a moment, contemplating the boy's words. Could his transformation really be part of something greater? Had the ancestors spared him for a reason? It dawned on him that perhaps the strength he had gained wasn't just for him. It was for the village, for the children, and for the truth that still lay hidden. "I think you're right," Ojuju said, his voice steady with newfound resolve. "This power, this form, it's a blessing in disguise, and with it, we'll uncover the truth." Together, they devised a plan. Ojuju, using his immense size and strength, would return to Ikono Forest, where the disappearances had begun. There, he would set traps for the mysterious creature that had been stealing children away from their homes. With Aoife's help, Ojuju gathered materials and prepared for the night when the creature was most likely to strike. As darkness fell, Ojuju entered Ikono Forest once more, his massive form blending into the shadows of the towering trees. He set the traps, carefully camouflaging them with branches and leaves. The forest was eerily quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. Ojuju crouched low, waiting for the familiar signs. The breeze, the strange rustling that always accompanied the creature's presence. Hours passed, but Ojuju remained vigilant. Then, as the night deepened, the wind picked up and the leaves began to rustle. The air grew colder, and Ojuju knew that the creature was near. His heart raced as he tightened his grip on the ropes of his trap, ready to spring into action. Suddenly, there was a snap. The trap had been triggered, and Ojuju leaped from his hiding place. He saw the figure struggling, tangled in the ropes, thrashing wildly to free itself. Ojuju wasted no time. He grabbed hold of the creature's robe, pulling it close with his enormous strength. But as he prepared to confront the monster responsible for so much pain and fear, something stopped him in his tracks. The robe he had torn away revealed a familiar face, a face that shocked Ojuju to his core. Standing before him, caught in his trap, was not some supernatural being. It was the king of Kpanchi himself. Ojuju's mind reeled. The man who had issued the decree of his isolation, the man who had ruled the village for so long, was the one responsible for the disappearances. It seemed impossible, but the truth was now clear before him. "Your Majesty?" Ojuju said, his voice trembling with disbelief. "You! How could you be the one stealing the children?" The king, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and guilt, struggled to speak, but the truth was out. Ojuju stood over him, and no longer just a man seeking justice for himself, but a protector of the village, a giant in more ways than one. The question that lingered now was how the village would react when they learned that the greatest threat had come from within. Ojuju Calabar stood frozen, disbelief coursing through him. Who could have imagined that the mysterious creature everyone feared was the king of Kpanchi himself? His mind raced as he tried to process what he had just uncovered. The king, seeing the shock in Ojuju's eyes, quickly fell to his knees, pleading. "Please, Ojuju, keep this secret," the king begged. "I haven't harmed any of the children. I only took those who were rude, proud, bullied others, or were neglected by their parents. They were lost souls, and I gave them a better life away from the village's troubles." Ojuju's curiosity got the better of him, and he asked, "But where are the children now? What have you done with them?" Without hesitation, the king led Ojuju deeper into Ikono Forest, guiding him to a hidden village, tucked away where no one could find it. As they approached, Ojuju's eyes widened in wonder. The village was peaceful and full of life. The children, once thought lost, were thriving, healthy, happy, and cared for under the king's watchful eye. Ojuju was stunned. The king's motives were not entirely evil, but the secrecy and deception had caused so much fear and pain in the village. Among the group of playing children, Ojuju spotted his long-lost siblings, Enema and Eneche, along with Ifa's missing sister. His heart swelled with relief and joy as he ran to them, embracing them tightly. Tears of happiness filled his eyes as they reunited. The weight that had been pressing on his chest for so long finally lifted. The king, standing nearby, spoke softly to Ojuju. "Take your siblings and Ifa's sister back to the village. Tell the people the children are safe. But please, Ojuju, do not reveal that I am the creature. The villagers would never understand my reasons." Ojuju, now understanding the complexity of the situation, nodded. He promised to keep the king's secret. He knew the king's actions, though controversial, had not been driven by pure malice. He had created a refuge for the children he believed were neglected or mistreated, giving them a second chance. As Ojuju prepared to leave the hidden village, something strange began to happen. He felt a sensation washing over him, like a gentle breeze sweeping through his body. His giant form began to shrink, his limbs returning to their normal size. The towering trees of Ikono Forest once again rose high above him. Ojuju looked down at his hands, realizing with a start that he was back to his original height and size. A deep sense of joy surged through him, and he couldn't help but leap in celebration. The curse, or blessing, of the giant had lifted. Overjoyed, and with his siblings and Ifa's sister by his side, Ojuju made his way back to Kpanchi. As they neared the village, a large crowd awaited their return. The villagers had gathered in anticipation, anxious to hear what had become of the missing children, and to learn whether Ojuju had survived his perilous journey. Ojuju entered the village, greeted by the king and the eager eyes of the villagers. He shared the story of his journey, recounting how he had faced the mysterious creature and found the lost children in a hidden part of the forest. However, true to his word, Ojuju left out the part about the king's true identity as the creature. Instead, he hinted that the creature only took children who misbehaved or were neglected by their parents. The villagers listened in awe, relieved to see the children alive and well. A wave of relief swept over the crowd, but their curiosity remained. "Did you see the creature?" one villager asked. Ojuju smiled slightly. "I did," he said, his voice calm, "but it wasn't what we thought. The creature doesn't harm children. It only takes those who are rude, proud, or neglected. But those children are safe and well cared for." A murmur spread through the crowd, and parents began to look at each other with concern. The thought of their children being taken for bad behavior made them uneasy. They rushed to Ojuju, pleading with him to bring back the rest of the children. The king then stepped forward and asked Ojuju to fulfill his promise to return with the remaining children. Ojuju agreed and set a date to return to the forest to bring the other children back. Before he left, the king kept his promise of a reward. He gifted Ojuju with great wealth and, as promised, offered his daughter Chaya's hand in marriage. Though Ojuju had never been driven by a desire for riches or status, he accepted the king's gifts with gratitude, knowing he had fulfilled his duty to his people and his family. From that day forward, the legend of Ojuju Calabar lived on in Kpanchi. It became a story parents told their children as a cautionary tale, reminding them to behave or risk being taken by Ojuju Calabar. The villagers, though still wary of the unknown, held a newfound respect for Ojuju. He had faced the darkest mystery of their land, not as a monster, but as a hero. And so, Ojuju's name, once spoken with fear, became a symbol of the power of kindness, understanding, and the unbreakable bond of family. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more fascinating stories. See you next time, and goodbye.